Hello and welcome to our program this evening. This is called Creating a Compelling Design Portfolio, especially for CED, but if you're not from CED, you are certainly welcome. My name is Denora Meyer, and I am one of the assistant directors on the counseling team at the Career Center and the career counselor for students at the College of Environmental Design, both undergraduate and master's level. This evening, we have 4 professionals who are going to share with us their knowledge and experience around portfolios. Assisting me this evening, I have my colleague Juan Garcia, who's also from the Career Center. Thank you, Juan, for your help with this. And thank you to our panelists. Thank you all so much for being willing to share your knowledge with students. It's really important and helpful for them. So I just want to give you an idea of what's going to happen this evening. Oh, and by the way, I wanted to mention that we have Zoom live transcription going on. And if you don't want it on your computer, you can go down to live transcript and you can disable it if you'd rather turn it off. And to give you a sense of the general plan for the evening, we're going to be doing introductions. I'm going to moderate a panel of our 4 guests. And then they're going to show samples to illustrate points they want to make for you to take away with you. And then finally, you'll have time for you to ask questions. And you can, along the way, if you have a question about something that somebody has said or what somebody is presenting, you can feel free to put in the chat, put your question in the chat, and we will make sure that we bring attention to the question. So thank you very much. And actually, let me move into where I'd like to ask first. I have a few questions I'd like to ask our audience just to get a sense of who's here for our panelists to know, for me to know, and for you to know about each other. I'm sure you recognize some of your classmates here, but I'd like to ask, how many of you are in architecture? And if you could use the reactions tool at the bottom of Zoom to indicate if you're in architecture, we can get a sense, okay, or a thumbs up or just a hand raise, that's great, or clapping, whichever it may be. So we see there's a good number of architecture. And how about, now you can lower your hands, how about landscape architecture? Who here is in landscape? Okay, so we have some there. Yeah, maybe a little bit fewer, and yes. And then how about urban design? You can lower your hand if you've been raised it already, or urban design, okay. Okay, not so much. And then how about SED? Anybody in sustainable environmental design? Here for the portfolio learning? Okay. And are there any other disciplines that I haven't mentioned? If so, you can put that in the chat to let us know if there's another discipline that isn't represented by what I've just offered. Okay. So thank you for answering those questions. That's helpful. And now I'd like to ask, which of you are undergrads? How many, raise your hand if you're an undergrad? Okay. So a good number of undergrads. And how about graduate students? Okay. Right. So we have many more undergraduates. Thank you, guys. And let's see. Now I'd like to ask where you are in the process of developing your portfolio. And so, for example, how many of you are just starting? Just getting your sea legs, if you will, or your land legs, I don't know. Okay. And how many of you have gotten a good deal done already, have been working on your portfolio for a while? Great. And then how many of you are feel pretty good about your portfolio? You're just here to kind of get some special insights, how to touch it up, how to kind of maybe hone it a little bit further. Okay, so it looks like we have people are either just starting or have gotten some done and want to improve what they have and develop what they have. Thank you. And if you'd like, you could put in the chat if there's anything specific that you'd like to learn from this program. You can go ahead and think of anything that comes to mind and put that in, and hopefully we will make a point of addressing that in the course of the program. And if you don't have anything to say, if something occurs to you, you can just put it in the chat, and you can just wait to hear from people and see if there's questions that come up as we're going along. That's totally great. Thank you. All right. Ta-da, let's move forward. Okay, so here we're going to move into panel questions. And what I'd like to ask is that our panelists each introduce themselves. And we have 3 panelists with very similar names. We have Christopher Tyndall, Christopher Jung, who has kindly agreed to be called Chris for this purpose, Kirsten Holder, and Alexa von Brainard. And I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. So let me start with Chris from ELS. If you could give your name, your organization, maybe a little bit about the organization, your role, and your degree, what you're coming with.
So thanks for having me here, Denora. Let's see, I'm with ELS Architects. We're in Berkeley, California. We're about 60 people generally. It ranges, a little more, a little less. We have 3 offices. Our main office is in Berkeley, an office in Los Angeles, and an office in Sacramento. I'm a design director. I've been there for over 25 years. I graduated from Cal, undergraduate, way back when. And let's see, so I specialize in aquatics facilities, recreations facilities, community centers, theaters, and retail centers. And that's sort of our bread and butter. We also do historic renovation and a few other things. So yeah, so I'm glad to be here. Thanks. Oops, Denora, I think you're muted.
Thank you so much, Chris. So many buttons to push. Thank you. Well, that's so let's move on to Christopher. If you can introduce yourself. Thank you.
Sure. I'm Christopher Tyndall. I'm design director at API Design. We specialize in large workplace projects, primarily headquarters, tech, the Googles, the Facebooks, the LinkedIns. We are about the same size as ELS, about 60. The office is located in Mountain View, but in this era of offices, we have employees around the country and do work around the world. And I was a CED graduate in '99. I'll actually say when, even though it was way back when, in architecture.
Thank you, Christopher. And let's move on to Alexa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alexa von Brainard, and I'm a deaf landscape designer and access specialist with MIG, Morai Capano and Goldsman. I recently joined MIG. I'm actually technically remote for the Portland office, but I'm in Long Beach, California. And I was with Olin for 3 years in their Los Angeles office. So I recently made a job change and I really like it. MIG's headquarters is actually in Berkeley, so I've always known about them for quite some time. And so I graduated from UC Berkeley, actually did my Bachelor of Arts in Landscape Architecture and my MLA too. So I was there for 6 years and I loved it very much. I miss it every day. I graduated with my undergrad degree in 2016 and my master's in 2018. So I'm a pretty recent graduate. I was recently a Landscape Architecture Foundation Fellow at the Olmsted level. And I did that over basically the pandemic year. So that was challenging, but I do a lot of lecturing and speaking in between my job, along with just my research. I do designing with and for the deaf and disabled communities. That's a lot of just my general interests, like overlapping with landscape architecture. So yeah, that's pretty much it about me. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you, Alexa. And Kirsten, sorry, thank you.
That's okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Denora, for having me. My name is Kirsten Holder. I'm a landscape architect and I work at Golden Gate National Recreation Area. So we are a park within the National Park Service system. Our headquarters are in San Francisco at Fort Mason, which is along the northern waterfront of San Francisco. We manage land in Marin, San Francisco, and San Mateo counties. So everything from Stinson Beach, Muir Woods, Prissy Field, Ocean Beach. So I've been here for about 8 years. And before that, I was in Boston for a couple of years, also with the Park Service. So I've been in federal government for about 10 years now. I graduated with a master's in landscape architecture and city planning, the dual masters in 2009. I had to think about that year for a couple minutes. And I did the dual program partly because I had my undergrad in landscape architecture as well, not from Berkeley.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. I realize that we have at least one student group, the undergraduate student council, represented among our audience. And if there's anybody also from CASA or AIAS Berkeley, or I think that's it, you can go ahead. You'll notice that they're putting in the chat their promotional announcement. And so those of you who aren't involved in any of these groups, you might want to consider joining them, at least learning about them from what's put in the chat. So thank you all for helping promote this event to your classmates, your fellow CEDers. I don't know, there's probably a better word for it, but thank you. So we will move on to the next question. And that is, generally, if you could please talk about what you look for in a portfolio. What is most important to you in a portfolio? And we can go in the same order as we just went through, starting with Chris from ELS.
Sure. So I'll give sort of a short answer, but what I look for is a few things. First is designability, just sort of your design sense, organizational skills, and graphics, how you lay out all your work. I think the big idea is, how can you tell a story using graphics and very little verbiage or words, and pull it all together to make a point, without having you to tell a story verbally, right? So when we receive resumes and portfolios, we get a ton of them. We get 50. We're looking at 50, and we have I spend about if a minute looking at it. So and we can tell from within that minute, within the 50 that we get, let's say, we can easily pull out maybe 3, and so it's really about those items I discussed. Yeah, so in a nutshell, that's it for me. Unmute. Denora, you have to unmute.
Shoot.
You're working now. You're back.
I'm back?
You're back.
Okay, okay, because my buttons went away. I can't mute or unmute myself, so.
Oh, you can push your space bar. If you push your space bar, it'll unmute you.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even giving me the option to click on anything. It's very
Oh,
weird.
wow.
Yeah.
Oop, you're muted again.
Should we just go in the same order that we went in?
All right, we're getting gestures. Well, Chris and I share a name, and I agree with almost everything he just said. I think don't be too scared about those numbers he gave you, because I think with the few things we can tell you today, I think it's actually fairly simple to rise to that group that really stand out. And it's a couple things. It's understanding that the portfolio itself is a design project. And what I mean about that, not necessarily is that it wows and sparkles, because we've all seen portfolios that try too hard, but think about it as a cohesive story. You know, I think one of the biggest challenges or mistakes I see, especially in academic portfolios, is it almost feels like you just took your projects and stapled them together. I think taking a chance to go back, to edit, to create a cohesive look and feel, especially if there's a through line of story, like Chris mentioned. I think also what I look for that would immediately make you jump into the top 10% is a graphic communication of idea and concept, not just final product. I think that's another piece with academic projects. You've done this project, you know, potentially all semester, and you want to show everything, but without knowing your design thought and discovery behind it, it's empty. In fact, I interviewed someone from SciArc once who had a beautiful design, but it was a balloon. It popped as soon as I asked the question why, and there was no why. The answer why was it looks cool. And so it just fell apart. I would also say make sure that everything you show, you're showing with intention. You know, not just this is a section, this is a plan. Use that as an opportunity to add layers of your concept graphically, but be clear and have a message, because I think too often it can get really long, and frankly, getting some clarity gives you some time saving as well. But if there's that level of graphic communication of idea, that already is in the top echelon. And those are the folks that get that first cut. And then we get really into it. And I agree with what Chris said too. A good exercise is just think about if you had 2 minutes to describe your project, but you couldn't speak to it. You only had these slides. We had a similar number of applications at a previous firm I was at. I think in that case, actually, there's over 200 applications for internships, and someone from CCA won it with 4 pages, but each page was beautiful, done as a competition style. So it incorporated concept with a few graphics, and that clarity of thought stood out. So I realize it's ironic to say be brief and go on that long, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, I guess I'll pick up after Christopher. I am not in a senior position, so I'm not the one doing the hiring in my office, but I guess what I can share is just sort of like what I've learned about applying in my own positions in the 2 firms that I've worked for full time. And, you know, I really think that portfolios are a living document. I have redone my portfolio so many times for different applications, for different, you know, like research fellowships, whatever it might be. I've redone it quite a few times, and you might find that like you don't want to keep redoing it, but you will have to redo it several times to meet different requirements for different applications. So just prepare for that and just, you know, take it as it comes. And I think for me, you know, what a lot of my professors told me, what a lot of professionals told me is that you should really have your personality and your passion shine through your portfolio, because, you know, like they mentioned, Chris and Christopher mentioned that they receive a lot of applications. And so, you know, you really want to try to set yourself apart, like to show like who you are as a person and the work that you're doing and what you're passionate about. And, you know, for me, I started doing a lot of research towards the end of my time at Berkeley. And so I kind of tried to highlight some of that work that I was doing that wasn't required. I chose to do that work and to, you know, spend my time on it. And just really like make the projects that you're so passionate about working on, that you spent so many hours working on, shine. I remember going back actually to some of the projects like after the review, like well after the review, to make a few tweaks or like changes here or there. So I think that just goes to show that, you know, a design is never finished, but you might have gained some feedback with your final reviews that you might want to incorporate. And, you know, and I think some people will appreciate if you highlight that, like, hey, I received this feedback and this is why the design looks like this now. And just showing like a variety of work is really important too. Like I was told that, you know, like not just showing your typical plans and sections, but also like if you have really good hand drawings, if you have construction details, if you have research, if you have writing pieces, just showing a bit of everything, like a breadth of work is always a good idea. Yeah, I guess I'll pop to Kristen.
Those are some great answers. I would echo what you guys said. I'll try just to keep this brief and add a couple other things. I think you really have to tell, similar to what others were saying, you want to tell a story through your portfolio, and you want to describe who you are and how that sets you apart. So, for example, if you were applying for, let's say, a bike planner position at a local firm, you would want to show more, you'll benefit from showing more than just that you can lay out a plan. You'll want to show kind of all aspects of that. So if you have volunteered somewhere, then think about ways to include that in. If you did if you participated in like a community design effort as part of a project of yours, you know, put that in. If you have participated in like the campus bike advisory board, let's say, you know, put that in. I think as much as you can show that this is your passion, what Alexa was saying, and what you are passionate about aligns with what the job that you are trying to get. So tweak your portfolios and do the research into the firms that you are applying for, or the agencies or the nonprofits or whatever it might be. Keep looking into those and find out what is their main driver, like what are their passions and what kind of work do they focus on? And then change and adapt your portfolio so that it really speaks to that place. I don't know if we'll get into cover letters later, but put in a cover letter that is specific to the place that you are applying to. Like put all your effort into this is your number one priority place that you're trying to get into. It takes a lot of work, and I think it's a lot easier if you were just to print 8.5 by 11s of your boards and staple them together, but that won't get you as far as like really doing the work to kind of create this message of the place that you are going for. I think we've lost our facilitator. Does anyone have any questions now that we've gone through that? Feel free to pop them in the chat. Okay, so I'm going to read this to everyone. Thanks for putting that in the chat. How might a professional portfolio differ from one for the application for a graduate program or for a competition? Would anyone else like to take that?
I can take a stab at it. I think a professional portfolio, I think, has more to what Kirsten was just talking about, as far as there are a few generalist firms out there, but not many. Most specialize in something. Most, if you go to their website, just tell you their values, show you their work, and they'll be primarily interested in how you will fit into that, not just office, but culture. Are you going to be willing to grow? Do you have that space? And what tools are you using and have expertise in? Whereas graduate school is going to be more about, you know, design, thought, and quality. Not that that is not part of a professional piece, but that's the that's the spear point of a graduate portfolio, right? Is that you can really bring a depth of design, thought, and execution. Whereas in professional, we want that, but when you start, you probably won't be leading million square foot projects. So how can you contribute in a way that will put you on a growth path and a curious mind that understands design? I think also when it comes to secondary stuff, we see a lot of portfolios with photography, with sketches, with sculpture. I think in a graduate portfolio that can stand alone as other skills. In a professional portfolio, that can sometimes fall flat because it isn't what you're applying for. Where I think it can sing is if you can tie those extra pieces into either a common story. An example from a previous portfolio I saw is this person was really interested in social justice in architecture, but also in photography, or someone who is really exploring in some of the sculpture connection and celebrating connection and showing that into architecture. So if those pieces can be tied to your thought, they're much more powerful than just an appendix in a professional portfolio. So those are my first kind of off the top of the head thoughts on that.
Hi, can you all hear me? Whoops, you can all hear me? Okay. Sorry, my Zoom completely went kaput. So I'm on a different laptop now and I apologize for any weirdness. What's that, Juan?
Oh, nothing, sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
That's okay. Kirsten just started moderating, so we were going great.
Excellent, so you don't need me. Okay, see you later. So I don't know where we are. Can you fill me in on where we are?
We just answered your first question,
Okay.
and then we started taking chat questions. So we just answered the first chat about the application for various kind of levels of entry.
Okay.
So if you have more questions, we could go on to that, or we could take more chat.
Okay. Are there more chat questions that are there a bunch of them? So I mean, I'm fine with you answering those. And then if we run out, then I have others I can ask.
I think that's it.
Okay. All right. So how much of the design process do you want to see? Have you already answered that, or is that a new question? Okay. So whoever wants to go first.
I can start. Let's see. So for us, for ELS, so I think a lot of firms, they look for different things depending on the firm. However, I think there's some carryover between firms. But for us specifically, we like to know how the candidates think. Again, that the portfolio is sort of your foot in the door, so you can get the interview. Process diagrams and how you lay them out on the sheet, it's how you tell that story that leads up to, how you solve the problem, the architectural problem or whatever you're trying to do. It's to us, it's really important. Again, it's really about how you think. We want to see, how organized you are. What how did you how did your project sort of evolve, and what were the processes in which and the steps in which you took, but also the diagrams. How did you create those diagrams that tell that story? It really says a lot about the person without you having to say anything. So we look at those very carefully.
Thank you. Who would like to go next?
I could talk for an hour on this, but I'll try and be quick because I think what Chris said, again, I'm just his hype man apparently, because I really agree with that. I think like I mentioned before, the final product is only interesting and compelling in the context of process and thought. A beautiful object at the end is great, but that's not what we're hiring for. We want to know just like Chris said, about how you think. Are you curious? Do you iterate from learning? You know, I think another automatic sometimes is showing projects in chronological order. There's no reason to do that. I think crafting your story in the best way to tell the story. And that might be different than chronological order. You may have explored things in different ways that informed a later project, but maybe there was something that you saw in an earlier project that you only realized because of a later project. So think of how even ordering the projects can play into that. But the design process from concept, if you did any research, info diagrams, anything like that, that really makes you shine. And again, that believe it or not, makes you rise up into the top 10% just alone. And that's really what I look for first, to see if it's there, and then dive into the specifics and see how successfully it's executed.
Anybody else want to add into that? Thank you, Chris, to her.
Yeah, I don't think I have much other to add, but I will say if you are applying to the federal government, like if Park Service, where I work, we actually don't have a way to see portfolios until the interview process. And so you can't submit kind of like pieces of work through our system. So it's not until you're being interviewed. And so I would think through, depending on the stage that you are in, once you, let's say, get a job interview, you might shuffle or sort or purge some of the things that were in like a digital version that you may have submitted online, in order, like hopefully by then you know more about a place that you are applying to. So when I'm sitting with someone and going through their work, you really only have time to get through a couple pieces. You're not doing the kind of like quick sort through, because you have the chance for someone to actually like talk you through pieces. So I know I said this once before, but I would definitely be flexible with your portfolio and not think of it as a final product, and think of it as one piece when you are applying. I know I have been in a place where I've applied to a lot of different jobs at once, like right out of grad school. And so you might have a version then, and then as you're getting interviews, you might have a different version. So keep that flexibility in mind. And if you are applying to a place that that like on their website really focuses on process and maybe community design or engagement, then I think showing that level of process to that place is, you know, I would try to match their style as much as you can.
And I would say, don't think we're asking something of you that doesn't happen in professional life. When we go after projects and use our portfolio of work, there is not a single one that's the same. And we are tailoring that to what we know of the client, what we think the problems they're trying to solve are, what is compelling to them based on their values. So this effort of tweaking and tailoring your portfolio, which I agree with, is something that'll just roll right into professional life. So this is not anything new or unique or one time. And in that way, sets you up well to succeed earlier in your professional career.
Great. Alexa, did you want to add anything? Okay.
I think they covered everything.
Okay, thanks. So can you guys all talk about text? How much text and anything else you want to say about it?
I'll start this time because I'm ready to be quiet and let other people talk for a while. Okay. I think, to Chris's earlier point, especially the first, when we get a lot of them, don't assume we're reading anything that's longer than a sentence. And so if you want to have larger text because you know more, think about popping out keywords if there is a block of text that you want to get into deeper. But really that first phase we're doing is frankly editing out. So if you're relying on anything in the text to tell your story, it's likely not even going to get there. So that's another reason we keep talking about showing your story graphically and concisely. That's partly the reason. Text, use it very sparingly and make sure you're not relying on it. That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's great. I think I'd like to add that if you do use text, and so I agree with everything Christopher just said. If you do use, or if we do read text, I usually read text if I really like the portfolio and I want to learn more about what this project's about, and that's the only time I read the text. But when you do add text, it should be part of the graphics. It should flow with everything. Just how you put it on the sheet. Whether it is bullet points or points within the sheet, or a block of a paragraph, a little paragraph, 2 or 3 sentences. It should work with the graphics and your project. Everything wants to flow, so.
I kind of want to add to that actually, because I'm a heavy duty writer. Actually, I do a lot of writing in addition to design. So I personally usually will have like a sidebar of text if it's allowed. Sometimes certain portfolios will literally say like no text, like just image plates, just graphics. But typically with like I like to call it the like the mother portfolio, the one that like I take everything out of, that one I just have like a bar of text on the left. So like all of the graphics can still stand on their own, but if someone wants to read deeper and to hear why I did what I did, they can read the sidebar of text. But I typically will just keep it to the side and not like continue it on to like extra pages, because usually with bigger projects you'll need like either like 1 to 2 or 3 spreads to show all of your graphics, depending on how many graphics you created. And so I usually keep it to just the first page on the left sidebar, and then I'll add like little like titles, like subtitles for all of the images is totally acceptable. Like even if they don't allow text, you can label your drawings. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I was looking back at my old portfolio, and I think the approach that I took was just to like treat it like your elevator pitch for a project. If someone were to ask you what you did here or what your project was. So I think 1 to 2 sentences, and that's your chance to say if there was like an intended client of a project. A lot of times in grad school, we had kind of real life-ish projects where we had a real life scenario and we were working with cities or schools or whoever it might be. It can also be your chance to say if it's a group project or your own project. So I think just think of the really key facts that you're trying to communicate there, because I agree, it won't be read unless there might be like one sheet that kind of stands out that you're interested in, or that like us as a reviewer might be interested in, and then we might spend a little more time looking at it, but it's not a starting point for most of us.
Thank you for all of your responses. I think we can go to a question that's in the chat. Do firms want to see community engagement experience? And if so, how can we best show that in a portfolio?
Maybe I'll take that because I'm not in a firm. So I'm going to make a quick answer. So for us, at least, we definitely want to show engagement and see engagement. We also find it tricky to communicate this sometimes. Like if you're summarizing a project, it's really hard if you went out and met with a group, let's say, and walked a site and then went back and did a design, to remember to like take a picture of yourself or the group. But I think this is where photos can really help. And depending on where you are applying, I think, and you will find this out by looking at websites, but engagement these days in particular, no project really goes forward without some kind of engagement. at least in my world. So I think figuring out ways to show it, photos are really the best way to communicate that from my experience.
Yeah, and I think,
wonder- oh,
oh, go ahead, Alexa.
I just wanted to add, it's definitely important to take like photos of the community engagement work that you do, just to kind of show like how, you know, it was carried out. And of course, now if it's like a screenshot of a Zoom screen, that works too. But I think a lot of that, it's difficult to put in the portfolio other than like photos and maybe like material you provided, or like, you know, if things were pinned up and like there were posted like, you know, all over the board, just kind of to show that like what you did to engage the community. I think that's really important, and that's something that MIG focuses on a lot, as far as like making sure that the community takes part in the design process. And I don't have it today, but when I was at Olin, we did a disabled stakeholder focus group for a small project in Eugene, Oregon. And I have pictures from that, and like all of the stakeholders are basically like at the table, and I showed like some of the materials that we brought, like some tactile materials, and just you know, some of the materials we were thinking of using, like, you know, for paving and things like that. So yeah, like as long as you can just kind of show that like, hey, like I did this and this is what it was, definitely include that, because it shows that's working with the people you're going to be designing for, and that's particularly important to a lot of firms, especially with public practice.
Yeah, and I was going to say, you know, community engagement or any of those other pieces, the more you can connect it to what the value you got from it and the learnings you got from it and how you applied those, that's even more compelling than it just kind of standing alone as a, and I also did this. Even if it's something you realized in retrospect, right? Or value you pulled in reflection and applied to your project. I think the more context you can give it, the better, as you tie that thread of story through your portfolio.
Thank you. All right. We have another question. Is there a preference for one project per page, or is it okay to spread out in 2 pages? How much detail should we go into about the project and the design process?
I'd say the quick answer to that is there isn't one quick answer to that. I think you should show exactly what tells your story and that you're proud of. I think 1 page per project is frankly not enough for that, for most projects, to show everything. But I also think it's well worth your time knowing how much you know about all your projects. It's well worth your time to stop before you develop too far into your portfolio to think about what you want to show and why. Because not only will that give you greater clarity, probably deciding on what the main story is. You know way too much about the project and you can't put it all on the paper. So deciding on that main story and deciding on the pieces that support that will also self-edit and make the effort more manageable, because you're not trying to document everything. So I think those are the pieces about thinking about how many pages. Some of them might be 1 page, some of them might be 4. As long as there's that clarity and consistency of design thought, that's the main thing.
I kind of said this before as well, but I think I definitely like echo what you said. And I think for me, with like some of the larger projects I did like during my master's program, like those were taking like 2 to 3 spreads each. So that's like 4 to 6 pages really, like back to back. And then there were some smaller projects that I did on the side that were maybe just like 1 spread. So it really just depends on like the breadth of the project, the size of the project, and like, you know, how many graphics you made for it, how much like information you need to show to get, you know, the essence of the project across. And I think this is where like just like the general like layout and template for your portfolio comes into play too, like having like really nice like headings and like transitions between projects, because like, you know, even if you're not using the same amount of pages for each project, as long as it's clear that like you're, you know, this is like project A, B, C, D, like, and it's all like split up nicely and evenly and cleanly, and that they can transition between them very clearly. That's really what matters. So yeah, I would say if you don't have a page limit, which you will have a page limit with some application, and if you to spread things out, then do it, but if sometimes you might have to condense. So it does depend on what they're looking for.
I would like to also add that, when we say, and this sort of relates to the question that was just asked, but I was going to say it anyway, that when we say story, what we mean is the story of the project. How did you start, and how did you achieve your goal? So you want to sort of show the process and all the drawings that tell the story of the project. But within that, and what the portfolio is about, ultimately is showing yourself, showing your skills, how you think, and really, I want to emphasize not just how you think, but your skills. Can you render? Are you a good renderer? Are you, do you draw kick-ass sections? For art, it's all about telling the story and doing it with some eye candy. In a nutshell, is what I sort of look for. And it's all encompassing. It all has to flow together, and it all has to be there for it to be an outstanding submission.
Yeah, I think you're touching on something too that I think I have had to tell students a lot, which is don't be your own critic. Don't show anything you're not proud of. In the story of a project, don't talk about things that didn't go the way you wanted to, or ended up, not going what you want. Don't show it. If there's a project you didn't like, or doesn't tell your story, or you don't want to represent you, don't show it. I think every piece is what, we can only respond to what you put forward, and that is what we will respond to. So show what tells your story, what shows you well, and what is cohesive. And that's really more important. I would rather see 4 good things than 4 good things and 4 average things together. So I think that's the other piece, is don't undercut yourself, put your strongest foot forward.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think there was a question about how many projects to include. And I think Christopher answered it really well, in that there is no set number. You really, if you did like a thesis as part of your program, something that you spent a lot of time on, then that should get multiple pages, and you should really show the length of that, because that is probably kind of captures a lot of who you are and where you want to go. And I would definitely edit out projects that you are not just really excited about when you look at it, because you need to be able to convey what you're good at and what you're excited about in this portfolio. And if one of those pieces doesn't show it, or if you're interviewing and someone asks a specific thing about one of those projects, and it's going to come across that you weren't happy with it. So yeah, definitely edit out and really highlight the things that you want to share. I don't have a good number about like the number of pages, but I would definitely do something that you can email. So whatever that means these days in terms of like the number of pages, don't make it too long.
In that vein, I saw there was another question about what format. And what I will say is the only guidance I would give on that is know that whatever you're sending us reflects on you. So a PDF is one thing, but if you use a free hosting service that has 3 click ads we have to get through and a flashing ad, know that that's reflecting on you, and you don't want to annoy someone or they have to pay a fee to see your portfolio. So be aware of that, test drive it, understand. And is it a site that crashes a lot? There was one that was really popular a few years ago that I can't remember, so that's not helpful. That was just a nightmare to navigate, and it took forever to each page to load, and so we didn't do it. So I think that's important. I think being flexible in the way too, certainly having a link. If you have a link, put it in the portfolio, put it in the email, put it in the cover letter, make it as accessible and easy as possible, because we are going through these quickly. I think as far as file size, I think that's another, back to the issue that Alexa brought up about different versions. It's a good idea to have a really tight one that won't be a large file that you can email and you're not worrying about going into junk. And then you can follow up with a longer one.
I think the challenge is always downsizing the size of the PDF, because that often means like, yeah, you have to crunch your portfolio or like export lines of your graphics, which it's difficult. Like I'm going to say it's almost like rocket science, because you kind of have to like, how far can I downsize without it like pixelating when I export the PDF? And so I do want to say that, like, a lot of offices will have like online portals where you have to submit the PDF that way. And like oftentimes it's like 10 megabytes or less, which is like nothing if you think about it. And so sometimes it's very difficult. And I do sometimes, like, I remember putting my bigger portfolio on Issue, which is ISSUU. That's a common platform to use for portfolios, as long as if you have the link to share. It opens up pretty crisply. It opens up like a book on the website. And so I like that platform a lot. I hope that's not the one you were referring to, Christopher, because that's the one I've used in the past, but it worked for me, I think. And so that works out. And then I know that, some people also have websites where they just have an interactive portfolio as well. Like I know people that put their work up like in different tabs, like on Squarespace or a similar platform, which can be free. Like I know like WordPress and like Squarespace either have free or really like low cost versions. And so you can also think about doing that, where, you can upload the PDF to be like embedded in your website, or you can have like separate tabs and just have it kind of spread out if that's accepted by the person you're applying to. So oftentimes the hardest part is having to downsize the file size to the required file size. That has been the biggest challenge that I've had. And obviously the big portfolio, the mother portfolio I have, like that doesn't work out for me. So I've had to downsize it quite a few times to fit the requirements. Yeah.
Look, are people muted?
All right. Looks like Dinara can't
Let me,
unmute
let's see,
again.
maybe, let me see if I can unmute her. Let's
Okay.
see.
In the meantime, I see a question about what do you prefer, renderings or hand drawings, and how is the portfolio weighted? I think that question again goes back to whatever you do best and are proud of. If it's renderings, if it's hand drawings, if the way we're communicating with clients right now in the digital world, whether that's a fly through, whether it's a dynamic piece, I think that's all on the table. It's what do you do best? What are you proud of? And then for me, as far as the portfolio, and I think the answer might be different potentially for other types of firms, but for us, the portfolio is the thing. That's what I'm going to look at. That does get you in the door. You need to, the second piece, if you get to the interview, is speaking to that portfolio. Does that same depth of thought translate verbally? Can you speak to your design process? Can you present yourself in a professional and thoughtful manner? So it's good to have the thought of how you will present it when you get to that opportunity, because in that opportunity, you can get in more depth. You can flesh out the story. You can talk more about it. But in that initial piece, I'll be honest, I don't look at cover letters. I might glance at the resume, maybe to see where they went to school or if they'd worked in an office before. But the portfolio in that initial phase is 98%.
Yeah, and I think that kind of reiterates the know who you are applying to, because for us, it's for sure cover letter and resume, just because that's kind of our starting point. I imagine for a lot of nonprofits too, that it's kind of the same thing, seeing that you can write as an example. So know the place really well. If it's a design firm, yeah, I think Christopher's advice is right on. But if you are applying for something other than a design firm, or I see a question about grad school in here, then showing more of you is really important than just the portfolio. I think since Dinah is still having tech problems, I see a question about showing thesis projects that are in progress. And I think, that's what a lot of us have done in the past too, where, it's part of kind of the updating process, but I would show things where you are, especially if it's your thesis, then that's what you are most passionate about, hopefully. And I would definitely include whatever you can in a grad school application. Hopefully you're applying to a grad school with an emphasis in something that you have been working toward. So I went into grad school wanting to work for the Park Service, and I showed examples, and I showed my background, and I showed kind of why I wanted to go to grad school and where I wanted that to lead me. So I would show works in progress for sure.
Yeah, and I think on that in particular, what you're doing in the beginning of projects is really compelling, as far as whether that's research, data gathering, initial concept, that's really, that's good material. And so if it's early in the phase, I would focus on that, and key design drivers you're refining from that. What will be your guiding light as you launch forward and move forward into the project, or if you're halfway through, how that exploration is going, but anchoring it in that initial deep thought. I mean, even now where projects are going really fast with big clients, we still professionally spend up to a month just listening, learning about the client, observing them, researching the space, researching the area. So there's a lot of good material at the beginning of a project that can, really intrigue a viewer to see where you will take it, but they know that it's based in that good, thoughtful study.
Hey folks, sorry to interrupt. So yeah, Dinara is going to log out and log back in. Hopefully that'll fix her issue. And she also suggested people can show their samples in the meantime if you have some ideas for questions.
I could show a quick sample just because I think it goes to some of those pieces about cohesive and showing what is good. This was an early professional. I did go to the one stage of blocking out all the identifying information, but that's about it. So this one, this was the first page. And I think there's a couple pieces here that we already talked about. There is a statement of purpose. There is a brief introduction, but it's tied into what is compelling to them from an architecture standpoint. Graphically, it has a clean and consistent layout. Let's see. Oops, I'm going to go to get out of this. There, presentation mode. You can tell this was designed together. There's a consistent, it may not be the color scheme I would have picked, but it is a consistent and gracious color scheme. Here's a single project that was, just a single image. And I know for a project you may have spent all year on, that's terrifying because there's so much you're not telling, but it is a very clear and concise way. The text on the left, I didn't read, I'll be honest, but I did get curious and got into it deeper. Here's some of that sweet spot. And this is some of that early investigation shown graphically. There is text there, but graphically you can tell the thoughtfulness of the study, and it's very easy to see right away. Taking that into design drivers, not quite icons, but very simple graphics that show what will be the explorations in this project, and then the beginning of pieces that explore that. The other thing that I think is really, that I hinted at earlier, but I think is shown here graphically, is if you're gonna show a section, add some meaning to it. Where's the concept part of that section? Where can you tell an additional story rather than just showing a section? So showing here how greenery is interacting with the section. And then, we see a lot of these more technical drawings and exploded diagrams, but again, tying that to what the exploration is and then the final product. The experience of the space. Professional photographs of projects we do we're sort of notorious for not putting people in it. It's the only thing I require of my teams when we get projects photographed is that there are people in it. Show how the space is inhabited, not just for scale, but it brings an understanding of how it is to feel in the space. And you'll notice all these graphics and renderings have a similar hand. You can tell that this is one person. Touching on sustainability, this was something that this person was really interested in, and adding that context to that was really valuable from a professional standpoint too. Living Building Towns being a professional rating system. In this case, it was arranged by project type, but you can see here, this was not 4 projects put together. There is a similar character graphically, a similar rhythm, a splash page, a page about the context and starting point and the research, even though that research is different from project to project. Sketches, I have never seen a portfolio that I thought had too many sketches. Please include those, especially if they really get to some of the ideas that then show up in a later design piece. This is a good example of what I was saying. If you're going to show a plan, add some context, add some color, use the color to draw the eye to what you want to talk about, not just as a graphic overlay, but really as a way to tell a story without using words. And then bouncing back and forth between scale. Don't just stay really high, don't stay really tight. Give an opportunity to move throughout those scales throughout a project. I'll go through these a little more quickly because I think there's some better examples. But here, this is just an overlay perspective sketch. Not the most professional thing in the world. Won't get you the job by itself, but in the context of exploration, it's compelling. Showing some of these renderings, how they get in, you being able to use the tool at a fairly high level. This was Revit with Enscape, which is a very applicable tool to what we use professionally. And these 4 projects were the only projects that were in the portfolio. This here is a really great use of a lightly rendered sketch. It's a very beautiful thing that fits even with the overall graphic content. And you'll notice again that each project graphically is similar, but all the content is unique. And then this as a thank you page that had all contact info, phone, email, LinkedIn. I know it sounds boring to get a LinkedIn page, but do it. It actually really is a very heavily used piece in the professional world. So that's my lightning fast example piece.
Thank you, Christopher. Can you hear me? Okay. Who else would like to share samples?
I can bring mine up next. I think it's interesting because it's actually my portfolio from grad school, like when I graduated. So let me bring my screen up. Okay, is that showing for everybody? So yeah, I think I'm just going to show really quickly like a few of the pages. It's not the entire thing, but I want you to get a kind of like an idea of how I formatted it. And I was told by some professors and some reviewers that keeping your cover like really simple and kind of like marketing or branding yourself on it is like a good thing to do. Just because, it's the cover, especially if you print it out. So like the first spread of my portfolio, I actually include resume or curriculum vitae at the time in like my experience in it, and also just sort of like a little about section and photo, because oftentimes like you don't know yet if you're going to get an interview, right? And so like kind of having a little piece of like your information in there can be helpful if you have the room and the space for it. And then I spent a lot of time sort of formatting like my table of contents because I wanted it to sort of feel like a book. I was working on ground up journal a lot my last year of graduate school. And so I was kind of like in the journal mentality when I was making this. And I think it's really interesting sometimes how people can personalize the table of contents and like the headings and the templates just to sort of make your portfolio feel a little bit more like you and to show kind of like your flavor and your interest. And so like for me, I just kind of made it clear and clean with like titles of the projects and like where it was located, what class it was when I did it, and like, you know, the professor, any collaborators on the project. And so the first one has, as you can see, I have a lot of text in their portfolio. Some of them I don't have any text. In this case, I had the opportunity to add a lot of information to sort of describe the projects. And I've been told a lot of the time that having like a really kick-ass project at the beginning of your portfolio is really important because you really want to draw attention to the rest of the portfolio, you know, to really grab attention. And so this is one of like, this was actually my capstone studio project that I did with, it was with Professor Meyer and David Meyer. And so this was a site in the Bay Area, and it was just like really like making the plan stand out because I spent so much time on the plan. And then thinking about like in the next spreads, just sort of highlighting all of the graphics that I worked on, like the sections, and just like highlighting my own personal style as it evolved over time while I was a grad student. And you can see that it also has technical drawings, which is really important to show. If you're going into like landscape architecture or architecture, there's a lot of construction that goes into the process of design. And, you know, you touch on that a lot in graduate when you take your like beginner's construction class. So I know as a designer, like I really started doing a lot of construction documentation when I started at Olin, and doing some now with MIG as well, and like really like having an understanding of like how materials work and you know, how things are actually built is also important in addition to showing like graphic strength. So like I would say including construction drawings is a really important part too.
Alexa, can I give you some kudos that was a really gracious way to show construction drawings in the
Thank you.
context of design. Sometimes we get appendix that's 4 pages of just construction details that are empty. So this is a really beautiful and great
Yeah.
way to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, David Meyer really focused on this with the capstone studio. He's very focused on materials. So I felt really privileged to sort of start to explore that from the design background. So like if you had that opportunity, I would definitely try to lay it out because I do have the appendix of a couple construction drawings at the end too, but wanted to kind of throw it in a little bit more graphically. And so like, yeah, for this one, it's for 3 spreads. This happens to be the project that has been you know, we have like one nice like perspective rendering and then a picture of like one of the concept models I did. So yeah, I would say taking pictures of your models, take a picture right after it's done, not after it starts to fall apart or get dusty, because yeah, this model unfortunately is no longer in existence. So we have a picture for eternity. And so the second project, this was actually one of my favorite projects. So I was at school, and it really highlights like how I took my personal research and like applied it to my studio work. Like for me, a lot of my personal research and work is with, you know, like the deaf and disabled communities. And so this is stuff that I did on the side and that I actually chose to apply to my studio work. Like it wasn't required. It wasn't even in the prompt. And so I chose to kind of highlight that with this project. But just really like, I like putting the plan first and then kind of like progressing with the other graphics. So you'll see that this is something that I do a lot, like have a kind of like the context at the beginning so that they get a general idea whether they read my big paragraph of text or not. You know, having the site plan out. Oftentimes we spend a lot of time on the plan. That might just be me, but I spent a lot of time rendering plans when I was in grad school. And then like, yeah, so just having some of like the supporting perspectives and diagrams. And for this one, we had to do really basic like floor plans. So you can kind of see like a rough idea of like a snippet of what that would look like in the section. Yeah, this is just another little idea I wanted to show you. Like for this one, I actually did include some process diagrams that I did to sort of study circulation of this site. And again, like just kind of simple context mapping and the big plan on the corner at the beginning. And then moving on to the, oh, sorry, this one skipped. A little bit more process imagery up here with like how it kind of got the shapes. Site analysis is really big in landscape architecture and environmental planning. So like if you're doing like really big site projects that you've done like site analysis for, I would say definitely include those graphics, because site analysis is a big part of you know, come together with our design ideas. And then the next one is a really simple project that I did with David Meyer as well. And I kind of just wanted to show, I know one of the questions was like, you know, how much process to show. And I'll usually just show like a little snippet at the beginning to kind of show how I started. And with this project, we actually had to do like a bunch of like trace paper designs. And this was one of the final ones that I had like kind of sketched out before going into the graphic. And then this is another example of just like a small selection of like other work that I've done, like again, kind of highlighting stuff like outside of the norm. I think is really cool to show because it kind of sets you apart. Like if you did like stuff in the fabrication shop, or like if you did, you know, if you built furniture like this, so if you did like sculpture or anything, or like art pieces, you should definitely include that. So I kind of showed, again, this is a really kind of a good example of like where I actually went back for my construction class and made drawings of the chair that I constructed. So it's just kind of integrating some of that in. And then this is an example of one of my research projects I did in grad school. So this one has a lot of text just because it was also a written assignment, but you can see like the graphics take up a lot of the space as well. This one is an example of a post-occupancy evaluation I did for an internship I had. And so this is a good example, sort of like what you could do even for community engagement, like maybe just including like images. You know, this is also like another little progress piece of like I was actually out there mapping things out by hand before I digitized all of these maps. And so I think it's kind of interesting to show like how you kind of got there. This is the appendix of construction drawings. But yeah, including those I think is really good to just show the skill. But again, like if you can integrate some of them with your actual graphics, go for it. And then I kind of closed out with like, for me, this was kind of like the culmination of my work in grad school. This article is like pretty much the foundation of all of the research that I've like continued to grow after grad school. And so I had this published in Ground Up Journal, which I was actually editor-in-chief the last year of grad school. And I also published this article. And so just kind of finishing, like starting and finishing really strong with like either graphically strong or really like your passion projects, I think is important, because if you think about it, you might flip through the middle projects kind of quickly in an interview, but like it's going to be like the beginning and the end that really stand out to the interviewer, I think. And so yeah, that's what I've got to share today.
Okay, I kind of hate to follow that, Alexa. That was beautiful and really nicely said.
Thank you.
But I'm going to really quickly show an example of mine. And it's mostly, I have to say, like, this is mine from more than 10 years ago. So I know that graphics have changed and everything. But I spent my last year doing my master's working on, oh, now that I'm blurred, I was working on my thesis, which is a book. And it has a lot of text in it. And so obviously that's not something that's really easy to share. And so, and my boards were, you know, if you guys have been to the thesis presentation, my boards were like an entire room. That's also not a good thing or something easy to share. And so I tried to, I'm gonna share my screen. Let me see if this works. So I took my thesis and I hope you guys can see this. I took my thesis and I put it into a couple boards. Right after grad school, I moved across the country with my husband for his postdoc. And so I couldn't just keep working on what my thesis was. So I had to kind of sell myself to a new place and a new audience. So I took my thesis and I kind of boiled it down and I put in It's kind of like a report, but I put it into tables and graphics kind of the best I could so that I had something to communicate. So it's just I think an example of like how you can take information from boards. And this was not the format of my thesis. It was not the format of my boards in my presentation in the end. It was something different. And I tried to get into and show kind of much of the process, because that's really what the thesis was. I wasn't trying to show my graphic ability. I was trying to show my interest through this project. So this took up, it was 8 pages. It took up a lot of what I would send around, but, and I used it, I think I shared the full thing whenever I had interviews. So it's really not until the last page that you kind of get into more typical landscape architecture projects. So yeah, so just an example of another way. Oh, and then I also wanted to share, I had this, stop sharing my screen. I have this 11 by 17 binder that has slip sheets that I put my work into. And I would shuffle those around depending on who I talk to. So once you get into an interview, it was an easy way to have it all contained in one place, but I could take sheets out. And then so kind of similar to a PDF you might send around, I would take all the sheets out and put them in a new order depending on who I was talking to.
That's great. Thank you. Chris, did you want to share anything?
I guess so. Let me share my screen here. Oh, wait. All right. So this is a project. This is from a graduate student from the Academy of Art from a few years ago. And I would say it's sort of at the opposite spectrum of what Christopher showed. It's a little frenetic, but there are some interesting things about it. And I wouldn't say everything about it is great. But again, there's interesting aspects of it that sort of caught our eye. Definitely skill set. So this person obviously starts out with a site analysis. He shows his pictures. Let's see if I can put it in. Oops. Let's see, I'm trying to get my view mode. Sorry. Okay. So the next sheet is again site analysis, and he shows diagrams. It's a little all over the place, but the way he does his diagrams is really interesting. The color choice, and you know what the thing is I look at this and I don't pretend to really understand everything, but boy is it interesting to look at. You can tell there was a lot of thought put into this, and so and it's all pretty meaningful when you get into the next sheets. So he does a fair amount of site analysis, and the diagrams are pretty nice graphically. I would say there's a lot on this page though, and so I think it could have been simplified a bit. So then he goes into, this guy obviously loves Zaha Hadid, so ignore that part. But he obviously has rendering skills, and that's a big part of the portfolio. I think is sort of showing off your skills. It's also, what are firms using these days? To know what software firms are using is really important. That way, if you have the skills, you're showing off those skills that can be useful to the firm. So again, you're selling your skills. Let's see, let's go to the next page. Again, more rendering. These are sort of old. I think these are 3D maps, so older version. Today, a lot of firms, just so you know, are using Enscape. Again, V-Ray, right? You guys all use V-Ray at UC Berkeley. So it's good to know what the rendering softwares are in the design firms that we're using today. A combination of sections, hand-drawn, as well as computer-generated, as well as elevations that are superimposed on the elevation, on the sections. Yeah, just a lot of things to look at. I wouldn't say it's the perfect portfolio, but it's definitely intriguing. Plans, he can do plans, sections, mechanical sustainability diagrams, shows the structure. So again, this is the plans, shows sort of how the mechanical works, shows the structure, how the building is put together, and then goes into big plans, and then sections, again, superimposing the elevations, the interior elevations on the sections, shows us, the kind of computer skills he has, software expertise. It's telling not only the story of the project, but telling the story of your abilities, and you're selling your abilities. And then you get in the door and you have to sell yourself verbally, and so I'm just going to show this one project that he did, but you can tell it's quite a few pages just to do this project. It's a huge project, but yeah, so just show that.
Thank you all. What a great array of illustrations, essentially, of points you want to make, and I hope that everybody in the audience is appreciating all the sharing. I mean, it's just really really good information, and in combination with what you've been talking about. So we're coming to the end, and I guess I would say, are there any last, I mean, I can't actually see questions from the chat from before because I've changed computers twice, or maybe 3 times. But does any of you on the panel have anything you feel like I really think it's so important to say this, or is there somebody in the audience who has a burning question that, it would make all the difference in the world for you to have answered?
I have a quick one. I think the biggest obstacle facing first-time professional applicants is just the wall of the unknown, right? You don't have the experience. You don't know what you're up against. You don't know what other portfolios even look like. So any opportunity you have for someone to take a look at your portfolio in a lower pressure context that can expose you to other options, I will offer right now, anyone who searches me out on LinkedIn and reaches out to me. Last year, I think I had 5 or 6 people send me their portfolio. I'm happy to go through those. That's the fun stuff, that we all like talking about design. And I think the more you can just dispel that unknown, the more able you are to really focus on your message, because you know what you're competing against. So I think I would encourage you to show your portfolio to your professor, show your portfolio to people who have just gone into work, that just get rid of that unknown, and it'll really give you some clarity of thought.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your generosity and just for making that point. Yeah, dispelling the unknown. What a great, what a great idea. Any other things that anybody really feels they must share?
I have a really quick one. Similar to Christopher, take advantage of being in school and asking for informational interviews, and bring your portfolio to those. People love to talk about their work and themselves and their process, and use that as a chance to hear from them how they got to their place, and share your portfolio. every single job I've ever had has been through connections of some kind or another. So take advantage of those and use those, and don't just wait for the perfect job announcement to come.
Thank you. I'm always telling people to do informational interviews. It's probably the #1 thing that I tell people to do and show them how to find the info. So thank you.
I also kind of wanted to echo what Kirsten said, because it's kind of a funny story, but like, other than MIG, like all of the jobs and the internships I've had have been like from cold emailing. Like I actually just kind of got lucky. Like I just put myself, I mean, of course, not everybody answered the emails. Like I sent many more emails than I got responses for. But, you know, even if someone doesn't have application up or like formal opening, but like you're really interested in a particular firm or working with a particular person, I would say like definitely try to network and just get your stuff on the radar, because you know a lot of the times the openings will happen kind of random, because I mean people move around a lot. It's a small for landscape architecture, we're a pretty small field, you know, I mean everybody kind of knows everybody at least through someone else or like a little bit, you know, so people leave and come and go all the time, and you know openings happen randomly, and sometimes you might just connect really well with someone that like works there, and you know they might like your portfolio, so just have it ready to go in like multiple formats, and just send it out into the void and just be ready to try it out.
Yeah, I want to circle back on the informational interview too, because I got my first job from an informational interview. And the dirty secret about them is they are interviews, but they're in a very low pressure format where you can be very honest about asking questions. You know, how did you feel about how I framed this? What are you looking for? But the like I said, the dirty secret is they actually are an interview, and you will get yourself lodged in their head. And that is a beachhead that you can use as far as establishing that relationship. And very often that will either get you the job, or you've already risen to the top of the pile when they are looking for someone.
And you can get help from me if you're unsure how to approach informational interviewing, or what to say, how to reach out to get one. That's part of my role, is helping people with that process. So please do so. Chris, did you want to say anything?
Oh, yeah, and I'll say this for you, Denora, because I know that you probably say it all the time. Go to the job fair. It is, and have your stuff ready for the job fair. It's just a fantastic thing that Cal does. It is so hard to get your foot in the door, and it's just an easy way for you to one, practice talking to a lot of firms, and then also, yeah, just get yourself out there. I know just from our firm, and Denora knows this, that we track students. So we send the same people all the time, and we track the students, and we try and do these seminars to help you guys as much as possible. And it's just a good, easy way to meet the firms and introduce yourself and show your work. So it's really hard. It can be really hard to get an interview. So, you know, it's just a good thing.
Yeah, so make use of all the avenues, the informal connecting, the formal context of a career fair. Start early to make those connections. The earlier you start, the more comfortable you'll be talking about yourself, asking people about themselves, showing your work. And this is going to be useful to you over the course of your lifetime, out of your professional lifetime, to get comfortable talking about yourself, asking questions. And so, you know, we are already over time by a couple of minutes, but thank you, Chris, Kirsten, and Alexa, so much for what you shared, and for being so patient with the technical BS that I'm like, what? Juan is left, but I'm really glad he was there. But thank you for jumping in and keeping things going. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and just appreciate your contributions. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And it was great. You know, a couple of you I had met before, a couple of you are new to me, and I'm so glad to have you in my portfolio of people to have connected with you. So thank you so much. And I hope you have a great evening. And people come, you know, make appointments with me to get help on any process, part of the process, the career development process. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Have a
Take
good night.
care.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Bye.
Bye.